Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to be here with you today, and welcome to the fourth annual conference of the Academic Parity Movement. Let's get started with a brief introduction about academic bullying in general. So we believe that academic bullying is a violation of human rights. And in the context of workplace bullying, we have a very well-defined contextual behaviors that are being considered as academic bullying and harassment. And when it comes to academia, we have a new contextual behavior such as violation or abuse of authorship, credit, or intellectual properties. And at institutional level, it means to cover up for bullies and basically protect perpetrators with public money, and at the same time force target to use code of silence for a variety of reasons. Now, the big question is that why we still have this problem in academia. And academia basically is considered to be a place to solve the problem. So why we have this problem for many years and can't address that? The very first reason is that unfortunately our research is kind of set up for bullies to thrive. And we didn't change the environment for many years. The other reason is that unfortunately we have quite a bit of examples that people, mostly mediocre scientists, use bullying as a career technique and as a career basically platform to get on the top and be untouchable. And those would be a big role models for other mediocre scientists to make them among star scientists. There are many other reasons. I try to briefly explain each one of them. The other one is the lack of educational system, a robust one that make a clear line between academic freedom and academic bullying and harassment, because many people and many perpetrators basically use academic freedom as a backdoor to justify the bad behaviors they have. The other issue is the overemphasis on academic index for securing grants and also basically for getting promotion in academic field. And as we all know, academic index are supposed to be a measure, not a goal. But very recently, we saw that academic index like H index or publishing in good journal have been kind of a goal for many academia. And according to Goodhart's law, when a measure becomes a target, then it ceases to be a good measure. The other issue is the helpless nature of the targets and basically the lack of funding that universities have to support targets, and the lack of long-term insight on the huge side effects of academic bullying. I had a chance to interview with tens of lawyers across the United States and in Europe, and it turns out that the other issue is the lack of strong law against academic bullying and harassment. And we also lack psychological knowledge to help targets to basically get healed. And the other major issue is the lack of unbiased and fair internal investigations by the universities, and there are many reasons for that. One of the major ones is the lack of responsibility among the members of the internal investigation committees. The other problem is that universities' reputation also gets involved when they want to consider and investigate those cases. And they have limited options to provide to targets. Even in their policies, the options that they can provide to targets are limited. And last but not least, bullies have connections within the university's internal decision making. The other issue we have is the willingness to tolerate bullying behaviors among targets, and this is mainly because of the fear of retaliation. And to be honest, almost all of the scandals of academic harassment that comes to public shows that universities try to protect perpetrators and silence targets. So in this environment, the fear of retaliation is very serious, and we can also imagine that the situation would be harder for international students and also for minorities because they are more vulnerable. For example, international students have issues with their visas. And last but not least, we have issues with the confidentiality of the outcomes. Unless it comes to news outlets, no one knows what happened to the target and what kind of decisions universities basically made. So in this situation, the question is that what can target do? Fight? Flight? Unfortunately, studies showed that they basically tolerate the situation and have to deal with a wide range of physical and psychological side effects. The knowledge, like a decade ago, was mostly on the fact that the side effects only are limited to targets, but now we are getting more information on the wider side effects that expands to the people of the circle of influence of the targets as well, including their families and based on their profession, other people. For example, if we have toxic environment in healthcare system, we can also expect that patients pay the price of the toxic environment because the studies again showed that the toxic environment can um, cause medical errors in decisions. So patients also pay the price. The other thing that we recently noticed is that academic bullying can also affect the progress of science and basically slows down the evolution of science through four major routes. The first one is that many academics are leaving academia to industry because of the outcomes of that toxic environment. And also we have hindering in the process of star scientists, which academic bullying is one of the major reasons for that. And we have a problem with the enhancement of file drawer problem, which is basically cherry picking the results and only publishing the positive results. So we get kind of blinded with the negative results. And the last effect, but not least one, is basically leaving the targets unhealed. And let me emphasize that this is one of the major side effects because that makes universities to train future bullies. Because if you leave a targets unhealed, they are vulnerable to show bullying behaviors where they get to the power position. And it's mainly through a psychological phenomena, which is called identification with the harasser or aggressor. So in this condition, we made academic parity movement. We established academic parity movement. We had experienced that a wide range of bullying and harassment, so we know how it felt to be a target. And in 2019, we basically co-founded academic parity movement, and the message was very simple. We wanted to see the same human rights that apply outside the lab, also inside of it. And the reason is that, as Einstein said, we can't basically solve the problem with the same mind that created that. So we need a great transform in academic structure. And with that, we need help from almost all of the stakeholders that are involved. So we have a luxury of collaborating and basically working with expert people in the field. So we ran a global survey with Dr. Sherry Moss here at Wake Forest University on better understanding the contextual behaviors of academic bullying in different scientific disciplines. And the outcomes was very interesting, that academic bullying does not affect all scientists in all fields equally. So what is considered as academic bullying in medicine may be totally different from what is considered academic bullying in social sciences. So this means that we need discipline-specific policies and actions to finally put an end on that and this particular problem. And for that, and in order to basically understand the ecosystem of different fields and different cultures, we invited a wide range of advisors from different fields and different countries to be able to develop those kinds of discipline-specific guidelines. So what we have done so far at the parity movement, the initial goal of the parity movement was to increase awareness about the issue. For example, if you see the literature, the current literature is mostly on social sciences, so other communities are being kind of discriminated from the information about about the incidence of bullying and harassment. So we try to basically make publications for different communities and basically convince editors that this is also the problem that affect your community as well, because any issues with discrimination, gender imbalances, and toxic environments can directly affect at least the science progress in their field. So that's everyone's problem. And we basically conducted global surveys, like I mentioned, to better understand the contextual behaviors of bullying and harassment. And we tried to get connected with different influential stakeholders so they also know about the emerging cases of academic bullying. We provided external support to targets. So, so far we have received over 2,700 complaints and reports. So we provided over 1,200 informal advice. And for kind of stories and cases that we see a pattern that is kind of common, we try to kind of provide the narrative of those stories in an anonymous way to the scientific community. So it could be beneficial for other targets. And we also have a bi-monthly newsletters where we basically provide information about the literature and news around academic bullying and harassment with the great help of our newsletter editor, Dr. Alison Vogelar. And starting from last year, we also tried to empower targets with basically financially support them to get legal advice about their cases so they understand what are their rights in terms of legally basically understand their right. And we also wanted to facilitate their healing process using basically trauma expert consultations. So we provide that option to them. And we also try to kind of get public support for them by recognizing that academic bullying is kind of a violation of human rights and it needs to be recognized by various stakeholders. And all of basically the efforts that we do are being funded by our advisors and members of the academic parity movement. And I need to have a special thanks for Gordon Herring family for their continuous financial support of the academic parity movement. The long-term goal here is to kind of make a clear and a strong collaboration between all the stakeholders because we think that this is the missing parts. And one of the evidence that this is missing is that even the recent report of the US National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine showed that even when they have education, a strong law against sexual harassment, again, they have little evidence that there are significant reduction in the incidence of sexual harassment. So this means that we have a miscommunication and miscollaboration between different stakeholders. So what we are advocating for is making that collaboration happen. Like I mentioned, institutions have many reasons to be kind of biased for investigation of cases of academic bullying and harassment. One of the reasons is that the perpetrators basically bring lots of funding to the university. So imagine if funding agencies have more active role in blocking funding for people with a history of academic bullying and harassment, probably they put institutions in a better position to kind of face perpetrator and support targets. And we have good examples of that. For example, Wellcome Trust at UK now mandate institutions to also provide anti-bullying records of the PI if they want to basically apply for funding. And the policymakers can also be in the equation and consider the health background of the universities in the ranking system, for example. And we desperately need formation of a global committee that can have access to the internal investigation outcomes of the universities and can audit them. So make them members of the investigation committee responsible for their actions. And this is not unique. We have the very same thing in publishing ethics. which is guided by Committee of Publishing Ethics, COPE, which is now almost all of the journals basically follow their instruction on how to consider the incidence of academic misconduct and data fabrication. So in these conditions, we think that universities can create a robust discipline-specific policies that they follow in action. This is very important because many universities has a very lucrative policies on how to face academic bullying and harassment. They encourage targets to speak up, but in actions, they don't even follow their own policies. So we advocate for that particular things. And what we see, at least from the scandals of bullying that comes to the news, is that universities actually try to cover up for perpetrators even with public money. That needs to be stopped. And by active collaborations, we think that we can basically enable institutions to provide positive examples on how they basically address academic bullying in their environment, because this is much needed in the field. I get invited almost always by different universities to give talk around academic bullying and harassment. And my very first reaction to each institution that invites me is that if you have one example that you faced perpetrator and support targets, you don't need me to talk to your basically members. You just can shed light on that example. Yet most of them don't have that particular example, even one of them. And the last thing is that we need strong strategies that with the collaboration of stakeholders can happen to heal targets. Otherwise, institutions would be companies for production of future bullies. And last but not least, caution is that bullying is bullying, whether it's upward or downward. So we need to ensure that any system that are being basically proposed by stakeholders are being protected and basically make sure that there's no abuse of the system. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Michael Lauer from NIH, and he will be talking about the NIH efforts in creating a safe environment for everyone.